we got my buddy Quinn, the Memphisipian, the country counselor from Twitterland, here to speak with us today. Go ahead and talk to us about what you're going to talk about today.
Today I want to talk about like race-based trauma and Black mental health, specifically for people of color, minorities.
All right, so walk us through it. Let's go through the history of African American trauma. Start from the beginning.
The beginning?
The beginning?
Well, picture it, Sicily. No, I'm kidding. So in American history, if we're going to talk about Black American history, obviously it started with slavery. So we went from slavery for several hundred years, from the early 1400s to the 1800s, and then right behind slavery was Reconstruction. And I think people forget how terrible Reconstruction was. Like, for so many years, right behind that you have Jim Crow, and then behind Jim Crow you have the Civil Rights Movement, and then behind that you have the burst of the 80s with all of these policies like Reagan era policies that especially like tore apart urban city families and communities. And then of course Bill Clinton 90s policies, the drug war. And so now you kind of have, we roll into the 2000s where we become more of a police state, where police brutality is just ridiculous now. And that's just where we are. And then we're not even including, we're just talking about Black people just in general. We're not even including minorities within the Black community. So women, people within the LGBTQ community, people with disabilities. We're not biracial people as well. We're not even thinking about those people, but as a whole, our entire history in this country has been terrible. I mean, it's just been one thing after another. There's no period where there was peace for us. There was no period where there was an apology for anything that happened. It's always been kind of like, fine, all right, we'll give y'all these very few civil liberties. God, at least I'm begging for it, you know? So the history of Black folk in America has just been absolutely horrible.
Now let me ask you this, so linking this African American trauma, how has this affected our mental health over time?
Well, so the thing is, like I said earlier, there's never been an apology for anything. So you have these years and generations of oppression just that keep getting transferred. You know, it's kind of like just a rollover balance, basically. Each generation inherits the trauma from the last generation on top of their own set of circumstances. So then we also live in a society where it's documented. It'd be different if we could never see what had happened in the 1400s. Like, we could never see visually relics of slavery. We can still see them. Those systems, those items still exist. I'm from Mississippi, so I saw the Confederate flag every day of my life. So I still see things like that every day. So you don't recognize until you take a moment, like if something happens, that is the point of a microaggression, is like small things that just kind of, you're like, did that really happen to me? Oh my God, that was terrible. And you feel it and you get so heavy, and Black people tend to ingest so much trauma that we don't know. Even just watching the news can be traumatic. Watching some of our favorite terrible TV shows can be traumatic, because we ingest these negative images of Black people and stereotypes all the time, and it weighs on you. So we have higher rates of alcoholism, of isolationism, depression. Black women have very high rates of depression, but it looks different from white women's depression. So we just kind of just think that it's okay because we don't look weak like white women do, but it's really terrible. And then we also have higher rates of somatic issues like high blood pressure and diabetes and heart disease. That comes from years of stress and internalizing things that you don't necessarily, you can't verbalize this was trauma. But there's a shift in our generation now where we're trigger warnings, and while that word gets overused sometimes and made fun of, it's important that we were able in our generation to identify, this is something that is going to have a traumatic effect on my mental health, so I don't want to see it, and I don't want to invite it into my space.
Now, touching on what you just said about, just we as a people just holding on to so much? Why don't we seek professional help when we know that something's wrong?
So my opinion about this has been shifting lately.
Mm-hmm.
So my answer to that used to be, well, Black people, we just distrusting of the medical community, and we just believe that that's for white folks. Like, I still can hear that, but I offer this alternative. What if Black people have always sought outside resources and help and treatment? It just was never with a professional. Because the concept of therapy is relatively new. Mm-hmm. Like, it came about in the early 20th century. It's not as old as psychology is. So Black people have always sought advice from somebody, right? Like barbershops, beauty shops, pastors, churches, things like that. Big Mama, and people like that. So we've always sought outside help for our problems. It just was never necessarily a medical professional. So our relationship with the medical community is also warranted. Like, we're distrusting. Mm-hmm. So I personally didn't know a lot when I started going into this field. I didn't know a lot of Black therapists and Black psychologists. Mm-hmm. So of course, Black people are going to be distrusting. Like, why would I go talk to white folks about my problems? I don't know them like that. So I kind of can see why Black people withhold, like going to therapy and things like that. Now, I take issue with Black people not believing in mental illness. Mm-hmm. That's a whole separate issue. But the concept of therapy, I would say we always sought outside help. It just was never from professionals. But again, our generation is seeing like a different kind of shift in it. Mm-hmm. Like, we're pushing mental health, and I think that's awesome.
Well, I do want you to touch on that. Why don't some Black people believe in mental illness? Because I've heard a number of things, but sometimes we just say, hey, Uncle Joe is crazy. Mm-hmm. He's just in the in the back room. Mm-hmm. Why don't we believe that this is a real
food.
thing?
Exactly. Agoraphobia. Yeah. Well, so I think that's a cultural, like a generational thing. Like, first of all, there were not a lot of words for the things that we had. There was no word for schizophrenia. Mm-hmm. So nobody knew just really crazy, mm-hmm. or there was no word for autism. Mm-hmm. So Black people just didn't know how to like they didn't have the concept of what mental illness looked like for a long time. But now that we do have that, a lot of people still carry over those old thoughts and beliefs, like especially depression. Mm-hmm. Like, of course, people are more prone to accept the more displayed mental illnesses, like anything on the schizophrenia spectrum, like where you can kind of see somebody actively psychotic. But when it comes to like the silent mental illnesses, like depression, anxiety disorders, Black people, especially Black women, like I said, like our depression looks very different from white women. So, for instance, our depression usually is rooted in codependency. Mm-hmm. So it looks very much like strong, independent Black woman doing everything for everybody. But on the inside, you are like dying and screaming, and you're overwhelmed and overworked, and you don't know why or what to do with anything. But we are reinforced that this is the way we're supposed to be. So if I come to a Black woman who's suffering from depression, and I tell her she has depression, she's going to reject that, because depression is something that's linked with white womanhood, which is stereotypically linked with being weak or weaker than a Black woman. Or definitely like mental illness in Black men is definitely stigmatized, because Black men are supposed to be strong and withstand all of these burdens. So if you're a Black man that says you're suicidal, you fail your race. Mm-hmm. So again, I think there's a slight shift, but just like with racist ideas and traits, like they're inherited from parents and things like that. Some Black people inherit their distrust or disbelief of mental illness from their parents or earlier generations. So
now I know that you're a mother, and happy belated Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you.
What have you told your son about how he needs to deal with say police brutality if he's ever pulled over? What are the mental characteristics that you instilled in him so that he will be prepared for the things to come?
That is so awesome, because my son, he knows he's a child of a therapist. So he's very particular about his feelings. Like, so, you know, he's like, I have feelings. And then he will just like go in his room and close his door. And he was like, this is my personal space. And he just turned 10 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So he's like been very, like, he's grown up around psychologists and therapists. So he is very in touch with emotions. So me and his dad actually took turns having that conversation because I want him to hear from my point of view and from his dad's point of view. And we pointedly didn't do it together for a number of reasons. But it was especially different because his life when he lives with me looks different from his life when he's with his dad. I have a lot more diverse circle. So it has come up where my son is around my friends who are white and something was said about Trump or in support of Trump or something about black people or something like that, and where, you know, me and his nickname is Possum. Mm-hmm. Me and Possum would talk about it. And so the conversation I had with him was essentially, son, you're a black person. You need to understand that some people view your body as a threat. And it's nothing you did. It's not about you or your character. It's just that some people will always look at you in a negative way. And we just talked about some of the ways that it could be negative and some incidents that might happen and some of the things that personally happen. And I just told him, he was like, well, does that mean I can be mean to these people? And I was like, you have the right to react however you want to, but you need to understand that certain reactions from you will warrant greater consequences. And he just kind of understands, as much as he can at his level. And when his dad had the conversation with him, they talked about what it's like to be a black man, especially in Mississippi and in Oxford in particular, which is a very white place. So, you know, I think he has the concept, and this is a conversation we have all the time. We talk about mental illness all the time. I even talk to my son about gender identity. He has trans friends. He's just really supportive. So I am lucky. Like, I know you can't always pick your kid, but if I could start over, I'd pick him again. Like, he's awesome. So I'm grateful for that.
So if you had to look into the camera right now and share with, you know, people of color in our community as to why it's so important for them to seek counsel and be, you know, relatively aware of, you know, the everyday struggle, what would you tell them?
So I would say, first of all, you're not alone. And as difficult as it may be, there's always somebody that's going through something similar to what you're going through, and it's okay for you to reach out and seek help. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you less of a person or anything like that. It's okay. And there are black clinicians out here. There are black queer clinicians out here that can especially help you and are specialized in trauma that is significant and pointed to our community. So if you ever need any help, if you need any resources even, you can always contact me. I will always try to help you as best I can if I can't directly be your clinician. There are several organizations and directories for black clinicians. Two, just off the top of my head, are NQTTCN, so that's National Queer Therapists, Trans Therapists of Color Network. Open Path is also a low-cost resource because with these new economic policies, a lot of people are worried about finances. So if you're worried about money, Open Path is a really good way for you to seek counseling at a low cost. So again, seek help for your mental health. Even if you don't have mental illness, it's good to go to therapy. It's good to just kind of talk.
This is really cool. We appreciate you coming by, and we will see you very soon, hopefully.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you. Oh, you going professional?
Oh, you know that was like, I didn't know we were picking it like real. Like, I was, oh my God, we had to get out.